Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 3 of Death Guard Faction Fundamentals by the Disgustingly Resilient podcast. I'm Aiden, as always, and yeah, let's get into this. So, on today's topic, we're going to be looking at the characters, and as I realised when I was making this, we have way more than I thought, so that was fun. So, just a quick caveat for those watching obviously, these videos are quite long naturally, and the series is going to be quite long. This is for people that really do want to dig into like Death Guard as a faction and really learn everything they possibly can about it. So it's not going to be like some channels that do like a 50-minute fundamental of an army and then move on. It's going to be a really in-depth. We're going to look at every unit, every strategy, then we get into matchups, etc. I'm hoping this can be an ongoing series so that someone that actually has watched the entire thing can be like, yeah, I know my Death Guard now. So yeah, hopefully that is what we're going to get onto. And yeah, let's go into it. Before we start, of course, balance update. So well, unfortunately for me anyway, but good for us, there was a balance update in September which has updated our army rules, which has made Faction Fundamentals Part 1 slightly outdated. Um, but obviously it's still all the information's relevant in the first one. It's just now we have extra bonus things, and as we can see on the screen, mainly we got some new contagion effects. We got a lot of points drops. I believe it's opened up a lot of new builds, and I think it has made Death Guard fairly strong as well. I do have a live stream covering all of this changes. So if you're interested in watching that, please feel free to do so. And there's information on there. I will try and do like an addendum episode to sort of touch on that. But from now on in the series, everything we talk about will be taking into account all of these new buffs that we've received and the points drops, etc. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So yeah, really quickly, just looking at it, obviously contagion upgrades gives us that ability to pre-game tailor to our opponents because sometimes we're going to change what we take pre-game. Minus one per skill, minus one save. That's something we'll discuss in a video. I believe it's open up new strategies and new allies. Again, we're just talking about sort of like all the changes that this has made to the army, things that will be taken into account as we talk about characters. And I will do an addendum video which will actually cover this in detail. But again, check out the live stream if you want my initial reaction with Death Guard Dave, who also is a very good Death Guard player and from Vanguard Tactics. And it was just good. It was really cool, really fun live stream. And yeah, really positive vibes at the moment. So, unit analysis. So this is what this video is actually about. So when we talk about unit analysis, we're going to be going through all of our units, and this one is specifically about characters, leaders, etc. And we're going to be talking about things such as the unit type, so what it does for us. So obviously this is all characters, but some like obviously in the future we're looking at vehicles, infantry, and whatnot. The roles that they play within the game we're going to talk about. So are they there to be, a beat stick? Are they there to be just a screening piece, just a tool for scoring secondaries, etc.? The strengths and weaknesses of the unit. Some units can look very good, but have like a big drawback. Good example might be a Hellbrew, which is really looking good at the moment with the new contagion effects, but it has that drawback of being 8 wounds with just a 2-up, so it can get popped quite easily. So that's something we need to talk about and consider. The synergies, which is quite big when it comes to characters, because we know in 10th edition 40k, characters are all about the synergies, the buffs they give to units, and the abilities they give to the rest of your army. Some of them are just beat sticks, and we'll get into them as well, but that's going to be an important topic in this video. And obviously how to use the unit to the best effect. So I have ideas on how to use certain units, other people have ideas how to use certain units, and hopefully we can cover a variety of different ways to use certain units and playstyles to get the best results possible with said units. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna look at my favorite guy as I pop open a fresh can of Cherryade. Yeah, boy. So, nectar of the gods. So, we'll start this off with my favorite character in all of 40k, and someone I believe is extremely strong right now. What I'll quickly do is we're going to talk about the stats you can see on the screen. So the rough idea of the layout is you can see some statistics at the top of the screen. Now these statistics that you see are obviously my opinion and in relation to the book itself and also in relation to the unit itself. So for example, Typhus has a high offensive output, but you could sit there and be like, yeah, but Typhus has 80%, Mortarion does more damage than Typhus potentially, but we're taking into account Typhus's points cost. So all these are relevant to their points cost and relevant to the army as a whole. So just bear that in mind. So with Typhus, we have about an 80% offensive output. I believe this is really strong. Typhus obviously has, for one, 5 attacks at flat 3 damage in melee at strength 9 as well. Um, Combined with the potential to now reduce other enemy saves, he becomes quite nasty in close combat. Obviously, weapon skill 2 is quite nice. The ability to punk Terminators or punk something like Wraithguard in one hit, and Custodians with the flat 3 damage. Um, it's very strong. It's a very nice damage number to be at. So for that, and plus the strength 9, he gets a good offensive output. Now on top of this, he also has his ability to deal the D6 mortal wounds, which I believe is actually the real gem of him. So for those who don't know, Typhus can pick an enemy unit of an 18 and roll a dice. On a 2-up, they take D6 mortal wounds. On a 1, you do take mortal wounds yourself, but that's the risk of everything. And on a 6, the opponent takes D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So because it's not a shooting attack, it allows us to get around certain things, as we can see below. So the below part is sort of like key points of the unit. So Typhus can be a mortal wound no scoper for those that grew up in my day, which means basically he can pick off units with lone operator with his mortal wound ability, because lone operator only applies to shooting attack, and this ability specifically is not a shooting attack, it's just an ability that he gets to use. So say you have a 3 wound solitaire, a 4 wound death jester, a 4 wound Calidus assassin, you have a really good chance, if you manage to come with an 18 of them, to just pick them up. And that is so powerful to just have answers to lone operators in this game, because at the moment lone operators are very strong. So having an answer to that, given that we don't have any lone operators ourselves, is extremely powerful. It's also just powerful because mortal wounds in general are powerful. Being able to just pick a super heavy battle tank and put potentially D6 mortal wounds on it, it's just free damage. It's free, uninteractable damage. It has other cases such as against Wraithguard, who if you shoot them can shoot you back. This is not a shooting attack, as we just said, so you can deal D6 mortal wounds to it without fear of reprisal. So it's just a great ability to have, and that's why I think Typhus is really a solid unit. Typhus obviously can go with Poxwalkers or Terminators. I believe there is no correct answer. In my games, I switch between, because obviously you can declare in the declare formation step, you declare where he's going to join. So you can go with Poxwalkers in my list, you can go with Death Shroud in my list, and it will change dependent on the opponent. Because sometimes he can join Poxwalkers, resurrect them with his spell if you're against a lot of 1 wound infantry, and he become unstoppable snowball. And then in other games, that's not really going to happen, like against Custodes, where I'd rather put him in a unit of Death Shroud and have a bit more of a melee Death Ball, rather than trying to run around with 20 chaff units. So Typhus in general, like I said, offensive is really good. His defensive capability, especially with the synergy of the new Contagions, is extremely high. So he has the ability to not only join Death Shroud and give them -1 to wound, as from their ability, so that's quite good. He can also join Poxwalkers to give himself up to 20 ablative wounds that he can resurrect from his melee attacks and his ability, which is also very strong. He also has -1 to be hit for him and his unit in close combat. Now this does stack with the new Contagion if you take it, which is the -1 weapon skill, because a weapon skill modifier is not the same as a hit modifier, which means these can stack. So if you have a unit of, let's say, Thunderhammers, which hit on 4s, weapon skill 4, they're now hitting you on 6s, because -1 weapon skill to 5s, and then -1 to hit rolls to 6s. That is insanely powerful, and I do genuinely believe in some matchups, which is a bit toxic, this, but I do believe there's some matchups where Typhus and 6 Death Shroud can sit middle board and be nearly untouchable to stuff like, World Eaters, Black Templars, who really don't have the shooting power to remove you easily, but in combat they're really going to struggle because they're effectively -2 to hit always. And even if they do manage to eventually kill you, the amount of damage you will deal back, because obviously they're not going to be wiping you out as easily, you're going to get to swing back, is going to be far higher than they managed to put onto you. So yeah, Typhus is pretty good on the defensive ability. Mobility wise, Typhus has Deep Strike, which is decent. He is normally Terminator's a 4-inch move. For some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it's because he's got hooves. Typhus actually has a 5-inch move, which actually gives him slightly better use as a rapid ingressor, because you can go from a 9-inch charge to a 4-inch charge. Whereas if you take other Terminators, you're still on a 5-inch charge. Don't get me wrong, chances are you're going to make both those charges anyway. But Typhus being just that little bit faster than your average Terminator stops him going down to the mobility 4. Mobility 50% for me is a 5-inch move for our infantry. It is the average. Another slight bonus going for Typhus is that he can use his ability while advancing. So to be honest, maybe his ability should actually be a little higher because with Poxwalkers you can move, advance, and still fire off the D6 mortal wound ability. Also allows him to action and do the D6 mortal wound ability, which is really nice because it's not a shooting attack. Synergy with units, as we just talked about then, he can give the -1 to hit, which can stack with things like Nurgling allies. It can help Death Shroud, because you can have a unit of Death Shroud that are -2 to be hit in close combat, -1 to be wounded if the strength's higher. Then you can pay command points and put -1 damage on the squad. Actual nightmare to deal with for melee units. So I think he's got really good synergy. Obviously, the synergy with the Poxwalkers, with resurrecting them and whatnot, also really helps. And for his points, Typhus is just daft. Like, for the points you pay for Typhus, I have never can give you a reason that he doesn't fit in a list. No Poxwalkers at all, still take a Typhus. Not even any Death Shroud at all, I'd still take a Typhus just solo because I think he's that good for his value and his points that he should be in every single list. So personal rating for Typhus off me, 100%. I think he should be also included in pretty much every list that everyone's running, and I hope the people that have used him also feel the same. He's such a good unit. Mr. Mortarion himself. So Mortarion I've already gushed about far too much, but we'll quickly go over him. Offensively, Mortarion's not actually that good. 5 attacks is quite low for a Primarch, very low to be honest. Makes him very weak against things that have strong invulnerable saves because you can bounce quite easily. He has no rerolls to hit, so any ones to hit can really screw him over. And these attacks are good. Strength 14, AP 3, flat 4 damage is nothing to scoff at. It's just he doesn't have the amount required. If he had like 7 attacks, I'd feel a lot better. But he does also have the Lantern and his Psychic Power, which he can shoot at the same time, because normally pistols can only be fired if you're shooting pistols, but he's a monster, so it allows you to do both his Psychic Attack and his pistol. Um, and also he has the grenade keyword, don't forget that, so you can always chuck out up to potentially 6 mortal wounds from the grenade. So offensively, he's not awful. He's not the greatest, but he's not awful, so I give him a middle rating for that. Mobility wise, he is 10-inch move, which for Death Guard is actually kind of fast. The only problem being fly is massively nerfed in 10th edition, and as he is a monster, that means he has to go around buildings, etc., which can hamper that movement, so it looks really good on paper. Playing it's a little bit trickier to use. However, his base isn't absurdly huge. His models are quite large, but his base itself is quite, it's not massive. You can maneuver it around, so it's a good score for mobility. Weird that he doesn't have deep strike though. Yet Magnus and Angron do, but hey ho, you can't win them all. Defensively, I think Mortarion is very strong. Don't get me wrong, if you put him in front of an army on his own, he's going to die. But that's kind of the same for like 99% of models in the game, so don't do it. Don't rush out, turn 2 and get killed. Sit back, provide your aura as we see below. That's the real power of Mortarion, which we'll get onto in Synergy. But overall, as long as you're not getting shot at by every single gun, T12, 2 up, 4 up invulnerable, 5 up feel no pain is not actually that easy to put down, especially when you have the ability to pay 1 command point and heal him for up to 3 wounds. That's really good because then those wounds once again go back into the feel no pain pool, which can then be saved again and then again and again as feel no pain works. So he's actually really quite tough. So I'm quite happy with that. His synergy with other units is insane. He is my centerpiece model and the core to my army for many reasons. The Lord of the Death Guard aura of allowing any unit within 6 to ignore any and all modifiers to characteristics. This includes AP, damage, movement, toughness, etc. Leadership. If you fail battle shock, you don't lose your OC because you can ignore the modifiers. It's so powerful. It just makes everything around him far more efficient. It basically turns off all your opponent's defensive abilities. Plague Burst Crawlers love it, but even direct attacks love it. I have a Predator Annihilator that loves ignoring half damage on an Avatar of Cain and blowing it chunks out of it every time. It's so powerful. And Morty has this ability to just snowball games. He gets you value from stuff like Plague Burst Crawlers. You're allowed to pick off units that they, think are safe because he just increases your efficiency so much. It makes people make lots of mistakes because they've played other games, they've got into their head how durable a unit is, now suddenly it's not, and then they make mistakes, and then you punish it really hard. There's so much play around Mortarion, and the mind games of him as well. People still think Mortarion is incredibly scary, So they put every gun into him that they can at whenever they can, which is fair. I mean, he's a very important piece of the army, but people sometimes respect Mortarion too much, especially in melee. Like they'll have a unit 10 Terminators and be like, oh, I don't want to go near Morty. Where really, Morty only picks up maybe 2 Terminators a turn. That's it. It's not that impressive, but people have it in their heads that he is massive, imposing, and scary, and the model does look massive, imposing, and scary. So you can use that to your advantage. Cost effectiveness, I have no idea why Morty came down 50 points. He didn't need to. He was already good at 375. At 325, he's just absurd, honestly. The only reason he's not 100% is because, again, the offensive output is a bit low. But I cannot see a reason not to take Morty, and that again goes into my personal rating of 100%. He's in every list I make. The synergies are through the roof. You can choose, this is we haven't even talked about the free auras that you can pick. So you can obviously pick to extend contagion ranges, which is now much better with the new effects on the contagions. It gives you much more incentive to pick that one. I don't think I'm going to pick it still. I'm still probably going to pick real ones to wound because that's just very good all the time. But the potential to need it, to have it when you need it to make a play is very important and very good. And also, giving cover to all your units isn't too bad if you get caught on Planet Bowling Ball. It's probably the most niche one because cover's so easy to get anyway. But if you're playing like mass infantry, like 60 Plague Marines, after you get out your rhinos, having an extra cover on all the time is not the worst thing to have. So definitely uses there for that aura, but mainly it's the ability to turn off your opponent's defensives, hit fairly hard yourself, be resilient. Quite often, I will just deal with the threats to Mortarion with the Plague Burst calls, etc., and Deep Strike. So pick up all the anti-tank. Once it's gone or hampered to a point where Mortarion can't be one turn killed, you're then free to release Mortarion and just let him go off and do his own things. Um, that's been how I've been playing him. I've been having a lot of success with that. So try it out yourself. Let us know how you do. For me, he's in every single list. But I don't think maybe there is play about him now. Maybe there is with all the changes. But I think especially for the price, I'd take Morty. Lord of Virulence. So Lord of Virulence offensively doesn't actually do that much himself. He's got a nice flamer, 2-up anti-infantry, which is quite nice. Obviously, D6 shots can be very swingy. It's the problem with D6 weapons. But if you manage to, land 6 shots on like a Custodes unit, you wounded him on 2s, which is incredibly powerful. So that's really nice. Mobility-wise, he is a 4-inch move Terminator. He does come with Deep Strike, which helps. Mobility for this guy isn't as important as his ability to spot for targets for your blast weapons is based just on line of sight, not range at all. So you can even see across the entire board if possible, which again means your mobility is less of an issue. You can deep strike into a good spot and then just spot targets. That's good value out of him. Defensively, he's nothing really to scoff at. His biggest defense is the potential for Overwatch from him and his unit that he joins. Rerolling all wounds with auto hit weapons is obviously very powerful, especially if what's charging you is infantry, because the anti-infantry then really starts to kick up a notch. Synergy with other units, though, he's very good because he's the shooty lord, as we said below. So he gives a unit he joins full rerolls to wound, of which he can join units that have anti-infantry weapons, such as the Death Shroud. So being able to reroll those 4-ups to wound is very powerful because obviously you're basically almost doubling your efficiency because you have a 50-50 chance to wound, and then the 50 that you fail, you get to reroll again. So you're roughly going to get 75% of those wounds through. Combine that with Ferric Blight stratagem, which is then going to add an extra AP onto them, and if they're within infected range of an objective, because they're critical wounds, the extra 6s to wound are going to be an additional AP, so that's up to potentially AP2, which is very nice. He also works with Blight Lords, who have stuff like combi weapons, they have devastating wounds and anti-infantry 4+. Again, you can fish for those, try and just put out some devastating wounds on a unit. It's not a bad use for him either. Other synergies, obviously, with Plague Burst Crawlers, Defilers, anything with blast weapons. Weirdly enough, even like Biologous Putrifiers, etc., because they have blast weapons with the grenades. There's plenty of things, and Mortarion Spell is also blast, and Hellbrute's Plasma Cannon is blast. There's lots of ways to give those units +1 to hit and ignores cover, which is extremely powerful if you manage to get a good angle on something. if you manage to combine something like Living Plague, give him a 12-inch Aura of Contagion, drop down, give something -1 save, and then spot it for the Plague Burst Crawlers, who are now hitting with Ignore Cover, you have Plague Burst Crawlers hitting on 2s from out of line of sight, and if they're near Mortarion, that is, which I'm assuming they will be. But even if not, you're hitting on 3s, that's still good. And the enemy unit can be -1 save, and your AP1 ignores cover, so you're potentially dropping like Custodies to their invulns from out of line of sight, which is wild and very powerful. So great synergy of other units. Cost effectiveness. I wish he did a little bit more himself. His melee's not bad either. His melee's not to scoff at. He is weapon skill 3 though, not 2. So he's not as punchy as you might like. You can really whiff and roll a lot of 1s and 2s. But for his cost and the buffs that he does for other units, I believe he's very good. I think he's also incredibly important in an anti-horde role, as again we talked about the anti-infantry flamers, or even bolters in like Blightlord Terminators and being able to reroll wounds is extremely powerful in managing to kill those, low save, high model count units. Overall, I give him about a 75% rating. I think I've gone off him a smidgy bit, but that's mainly because the new auras make the ignores cover, which is still very powerful. Like it's why it's still a good rate. I'm still personally using him, but you can get away with not having him as much, given we have other ways to put stuff like Boil Blight out, -1 save, etc., etc. But I still think he's a solid unit. You'll never be upset to have him in your list, especially if you're running units like Plague Burst Crawlers. So let's give a sip. 1 second. Lord of Contagion. First dud for me personally. The Lord of Contagion is the melee beat stick to the Lord of Virulence. He's the alter ego to him. Offensively, he's not bad. He's got a flat 3 damage weapon, which is obviously very powerful. Like Typhus, I'm not going to say Typhus is good beat stick and this guy's bad. He's obviously quite good at punching. The problem of the Lord of Contagion is he's not very fast. He has no other like ability to impact the game, so he can't. Lord of Virulence, drops in. He can flame a unit as he comes down. Maybe he fails the charge, but he's still spotting for units. He's still controlling area around him because of his Overwatch, etc. This guy doesn't. This guy basically needs to be rapid ingressed, in my opinion, or set up in a position where he can do a heroic intervention. Because having a 4-inch move on a pure melee character is not great. It's really not great. Now, you can rapid ingress him in, but you need to make sure that once you're down, you're not planning to go much further because he's so slow. He's not really going to get around the board. You can't be advancing and still make an impact on the game. Again, Lord of Virulence can. You can advance, yeah, you give up your shooting, yeah, you give up your charging, but you can still spot targets, which is nice. Defensively, he's not great either, this guy. He's basically the same. He has a bit of a gimmicky ability where if he takes damage, he deals a mortal back, but to do that, it either has to be a precision weapon or your entire bodyguard unit's dead, which is neither really a good position to be in. So I don't like his rule, the gimmicky one anyway, where he splashes mortals. The best bit about this guy is his synergy with other units, which is the reroll all hit rolls in melee. Now the problem with this is unless you're farming, which would be, when I say farming, what I mean is if you have an ability like sustained hits, which we can get from our stratagem, on lethal hits from our weapons, sometimes against certain targets it is better to reroll successful and failed hits in an effort to just get as many 6s as possible. In which case, this guy is actually useful because he's our only source of melee rerolls to hit. So you can run into a unit with Death Shroud, and rather than relying on, 2s to hit and then going into 5s to wound, you can go still 2s to hit, but we're going to pick up everything that's not a 6 and go again and just try and get as many lethal hits, and then you can pay the command point for sustained hits and try and get as many lethal and sustained hits as possible. It's not awful, but I just again, it's all about trying to make melee with this guy with a 4-inch move. He basically forces a rapid ingress, and if you get screened out, or if they're spread out even, you're maybe going to get one combat, and then you kind of just linger around not doing much. And he can massively increase the damage potential of like Death Shroud with the full rerolls to hit. But I personally don't feel like he's worth the cost, because there's so many things that can do the same job but just better. So for me, his cost effectiveness just isn't there because if you fail a charge or anything happens where you get phantasmed away from, you've got this unit just sits there and does literally nothing but exist. And if I want to do that, I can do that with Boxwalkers. So personal rating for me, 25%. I don't think he's very good, which is a shame because the model is sick. I love the model so much. I think this guy needs another rules pass. I think he needs to look at him a bit more. But if you're in a heavy melee meta, he's pretty good fucking beat stick. Again, all the problems I just listed don't matter so much if the enemy is running to you as well. So you can use him in those instances. But right now, I don't see a reason to take Lord of Contagion over any of the other leaders. The main leaders anyway, Virulence. Oh, there's a worse one than this guy. Kinetic Chaos Lord, so we're going to combine the normal Power Armor one and the Terminator Lord because they have the same abilities, it's just the stats change on them. So, offensively, these guys are pretty decent. You can take combi weapons, you can take a Plague Fist, which is a decent weapon to have. Hits on twos, it's pretty good. Um, their main offense, though, comes from their weird aura that they have, which is at the end of every player turn, you roll a dice for every enemy unit within contagion range, and on a 4-up, they take D3 mortal wounds. So this is the end of your turn and your end of your opponent's turn. And this, over the course of a game, can actually rack up a lot of value and points. This guy, his offensive output isn't about. It's not like the Lord of Contagion where you're just trying to get in there and beat something to death instantly. This guy gets his value over time. He's very much attritional. Damage over time, slowly draining all these units around him. And for games where there's a middle objective on a board, I found him to actually be really cool. I'm taking him to an event on this Tuesday to give him a proper trial by fire and see how he does. But so far I've been impressed by him. He'll never blow your mind. He's never going to like just wipe out a unit. But when you actually sit at the end of the game and add up the actual mortals he did to certain things, I've never been disappointed. I always feel like he's earned his points back. This is made even better with the Living Plague enhancement to make that aura even larger. I think he's doing really well so far. He also, mobility wise, again, depends if it's the Terminator or the Power Armor. The Terminator, though, is 1 inch less moves, so he only moves 4, but the Terminator obviously does come with Deep Strike, so it kind of evens out really in the end. As long as they get into a good position, a good spot to set up, such as like a middle L around a middle objective, and he can hide in there and just keep pulsing out the mortals, I don't think mobility is a massive issue. But you can also use this guy for rapid ingress, things like that. He's decent. Mobility is obviously not his strongest suit, but I don't think it's terrible. Defensively, he's your average Joe. He's either got a 2-up or a 3-up, followed by a 4-up invulnerable and 5 to 6 wounds. There's nothing really to write home about, particularly. Yeah, he's about as average as he goes on that. Synergy with other units, the ability to have this contagion dealing mortal wounds and also potentially spreading the new contagions, and then if you combine it with Living Plague, like we said, he actually gives quite a bit of synergy to other units because he's just chipping away at things. He's putting stuff in contagion range while he's doing it. He can join a unit and give them real ones to hit, which is genuinely not a terribly bad ability. We don't really have many rerolls to hit, so having a reroll ones to hit on units is actually a decent ability, though I don't think you include him for that. I think you more include him for his mortal wound pulsing ability. I honestly feel like this guy is more of a solo tech piece rather than joining a unit to help them. But having the flexibility, again, as we said before, you decide at the start, having the ability to decide upon this is nice, a bit of toolbox strategy. You can obviously say, okay, this matchup, I'm going to run him solo, put him in the middle in an L, hidden away. He's just going to pulse mortal wounds all game. Or, okay, they've brought indirect, so I can't do that this game because he'll just die. So I'm going to put him with a unit of Death Shroud and give them real ones to hit because that's honestly not the worst thing for them. Weapon skill 2, real ones to hit, basically guaranteeing they hit every single time. So he's pretty good, as well as being a decent beat stick himself with 5 Plague Fist attacks, which is what I would run him with. Overall, cost effectiveness, he's quite cheap, this guy. Living Plague obviously does up the cost, but again, as I've said, I've always looked at him at the end of the game, tallied up what he's actually dealt damage to and what he's killed, and I've always been fairly impressed about how effective he's been for that, and how much he's sort of earned his cost back for very little investment. Because again, this aura doesn't need line of sight, doesn't need any interaction from you. You can action while you're doing it, so you can just sit in the middle behind an L, deploying teleport homers every single turn while pulsing mortal wounds out, pulsing out contagion over a massive area, and scoring points while you're at it. And your opponent has to do something about it, otherwise they're going to take tons of mortal wounds. They're going to be in contagion range all the time. You're going to keep scoring secondaries. But the thing is, if they come to deal with him, and he's ran solo especially, chances are he can't get picked up just by a generic like unit of intercessors. They're going to have to actually put something quite killy into him to kill him properly and make sure he dies. At that point, you can then trade back much harder because chances are what they used to kill him is going to be of more value than what he was worth. So you can then trade up in that instance. Terminator Sorcerer. So the Terminator Sorcerer is an interesting one. I was running him before the nerfs. I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to it. He is an interesting piece. So offensively, this varies massively. He has the damage spike potential to be insane. He has once per game. He can make his spell Strength 8, AP 2 damage flat free once per game on 2d6 shots. Now, I've had games where I've whiffed and he's done nothing, in which case his offensive output is garbage. I've also had games where he's picked up 6 custodies himself, in which case his output is insane. He's very spiky, but having the threat of it there is sometimes plays mind games with your opponents, and sometimes when it does go off and you do manage to pick up something like a ton of shield guard or wraith guard and stuff like that, the it doesn't matter what happens to him after that point. He can even be ran solo, drop in, potentially pick up like 4 Wraith Guard and then die. It doesn't matter because he's just killed double his points in value, as well as being then needed to be shot and to be a pain. And he's still got this decent durability of 2 up, 4 up, which is really nice. Mobility does have deep strikes. You can run him solo. You can run him with units. You can get him to those angles, those nasty spots where people didn't see. Oh, you've got a load of free wound Eldar jet bikes there. Let me just drop in and pick all them up real quick. I've done it multiple times. And when you find a perfect target for him and manage to get him onto it, and he gets a good roll, the value from this guy is insane. Like, it's through the roof. He also is quite versatile because, as we said, he can join units as well, of course, which again as well dealing the damage. He has his spell, which is on a 2-up. You basically get our disgustingly resilient stratagem, which is 2 command points for free because he gives you -1 damage in melee for him and his entire unit. Now, given that that stratagem is normally 2 command points, having it for potentially free as long as you can roll 2-up every turn is extremely good value because you're saving so many command points and it increases the defense of a unit immeasurably. You can have a unit Death Shroud be -1 weapon skill. You've got Nurglings nearby, -1 to be hit, so the -2 to hit you. You've got this guy in the squad, so the -1 to be wounded from strength higher because of their rule, and then he's also giving them free -1 damage. And if you're a real nut job, you can still pay the stratagem and make damage free weapons damage 1 because it's -2 damage because they do stack. So good, so powerful, extremely versatile unit, super cheap. He's like 75 points. So you never, even if he doesn't do much, he comes down, he whiffs his spell, and he dies. Or you can just drop him in, just deploy some teleport homers, score a secondary. It's not a giant loss if he doesn't make up his value. It's not like having a 200-point unit that does nothing. So I reckon this guy is fantastic. I reckon he's a good pick. I don't think he's as auto-include as I would have said before, but just having one in your list for his points cost is just so nice because again, you can run him solo, you can run him in a squad, you can use him to just drop in and try and pick up a unit. You could use him to just drop in. He's only got a 40mm base, so he's really small. Drop in, do a secondary, threaten an 18-inch super spell, put him in a squad with Death Shroud. If you're against melee, go and enjoy -2 damage in melee combat. I think he's a good unit. I think everyone should own at least one and play around with him. There's a lot of creative uses for this guy, and the more you play with him, the more you'll find them. Daemon Prince. Daemon Princes are interesting. They're a bit weird. Offensively, they look decent until you realize they're only like strength 8, which kind of sucks. Against infantry and elite infantry, they're actually really good, but the problem is Daemon Princes used to be able to slap vehicles, but now you're wounding pretty much every vehicle in the game on a 5, which is not great. It's not really where you want to be with only 6 attacks. Which is, not ideal given how many points this guy is. Mobility wise, this guy is extremely slow. He's fast for Death Guard. He's like 7-inch move. However, he's a monster, which means he has to go around every single building. Which again technically means he's not really 7-inch move. He's a lot slower than that. Um, so you have a melee beat stick monster, which is slow. That's never a good place to be in. Now defensively, he is toughness 11 with a 2-up 4-up. That's pretty good. That's honestly not bad. That's decent. That's almost Mortarian levels of toughness and save and vulnerable. T11 is quite a nice place to be. However, it's spiky. 4-up invulnerables are spiky. He's got no feel, no pain. He does give out a 6-up feel, no pain aura for infantry, but not himself because he's a monster. So if he got that, I'd feel a bit better, but he doesn't, which kind of sucks. But he's relatively tough. He will obviously die to any dedicated firepower to him, but having the 2-up and the 4-up invulnerable is a good place to be. Gives you that spike potential to roll really hot on the 4-ups, and obviously 2-up makes you immune to mainly small arms fire combined with a toughness 11. Is really good for that as well. Synergy with other units. Again, he has a 6-up feel no pain aura. It's something. It's okay. I don't think it's great. If it was a 5-up feel no pain aura, it'd be broken. But would it be that much? Because it's just an aura around him. Probably would be a bit much. But 6-up feel no pain. It just it's if the enemy has the perfect damage number into you, so like 3 damage free versus Terminators, a 6-up actually becomes very good because a single 6-up can save an entire other model from a shot. However, it's just so unreliable to have a 6-up feel no pain and that situation to emerge. So, and if he was like 50 points, it's probably worth including for that situation, but he's not. He's like near like 175 or something. So if you look at his cost effectiveness, I can't rate him that high. He's a decent term infantry beater, but he's not very good into vehicles. He's also slow, and his aura's not that impactful for like 175 points. It's not really it for me. Personally, I can see this guy maybe fitting a skew list of, we don't want anything under T9, but at the same time, I end up asking myself, for this guy, would I not rather just pay 25 points more and get 2 bloat drones? Probably would, but there's potential there to mess around with him. So overall, I'm not that impressed with him, but 45% rating. I think there's potential for you to make a list based around, high toughness or no infantry, just go all monsters, all vehicles, and he might do well in that list. But in a generic list, unless you're running lots of like infantry into a meta that has the perfect damage requirements, I can't really recommend him. Daemon Prince with wings. So get all the problems we just said. Give him a bit more damage because he's potential for devastating wounds, but not the strength increase that he needs. Oh, also both of these guys, deadly pathogen on them is actually decent. It does get up to strength 9, which means if you're near a vehicle, you drop it down from T10 to T9, becomes a bit more reliable. Drop down T9 to T8, you wounded on freeze. Deadly pathogen is basically mandatory in these guys, in my opinion. +1 attack, +1 strength. It just helps them out quite a lot. But yeah, this guy's Dev Wounds, which again, with a damage-free weapon is quite nice. But again, you only have 6 attacks, so average says you make 1. And no way to reroll your wounds, so not really the most reliable. Can be spiky. They'll have turns where you roll 4 6s and just obliterate some, but it's not always the case. Mobility-wise, this guy's a lot better though. He has Deep Strike now innately, and he also has like a 11-inch move, which is a lot better. It has Fly, but again, Fly is not that important. It does mean you can fly over enemy units to get behind them though, which is quite nice because if you're going to make a charge with this guy, you want to make sure you're at least going to the right unit and not just chaff. So being able to fly over those rather than getting stuck with the Walking Prince is quite nice. Defensively, he's basically the same as the other one, except he's T10 instead of 11. 10 to 11 is not a massive jump. Like, it doesn't make any difference versus Strength 5, Strength 6. Strength 5 still wound you on 6s. Strength 6 still wound you on 5s. And a lot of weapons are like Strength 12. I've not really found like a Strength 11 weapon or a Strength 10. There probably are out there, but they're not mega common, so I don't think it's a bigger loss as you think. He also can force Battle Shock on opponents, which has a little bit of synergy with other units. You can bring a Blightbringer, and you can have another way to force a Battle Shock test with alongside your Plague Burst crawlers. So you could potentially, if you're like really against Necrons all the time, maybe it's another way to make them fail Battle Shock, which is something. but overall it's not a super impactful rule. Um, I wouldn't put too much value in it. He's just a fairly fast flying beat stick. But the thing is, for me personally, that's not enough reason to pay the points for him. Because he's not even beat sticky really. He's okay at beat sticking, but he's not beat sticky enough. He doesn't have high enough strength to tackle vehicles. Like someone can run a rhino into this guy and he could genuinely get stuck for a turn or two. And like that's not what you want for a melee monster beat stick anyway. So personal rating and cost effectiveness is about 45. He's again, he has maybe some lists that he works in, but overall, I probably wouldn't recommend rushing out to get one. Malignant Plagucaster. So, offensively, this guy is pretty good. He has quite a good flamer type weapon with a good profile. It's like 6 -2 D3 damage. That's quite a good profile. I would never say it's not. It's quite strong, a really powerful flamer, especially with the multi damage on it. It's very nice. Mobility wise, he's just a marine, so 5-inch move. It's pretty, it's kind of slow, but he can get in rhinos because he's a power armor variant, so that does help ease that. Um, Defensive wise, he has some unique gimmicky abilities, so he can give enemy units -1 to wound in melee, and he can also give them -2 to movement and charge. So actually, against the right matchups again, if you come across a Black Templars, World Eaters, these are two incredibly powerful debuffs. However, the movement one isn't as strong as it seems because to use it you have to, I think it's within 12. So -2 in someone's movement and charge when someone's that close already is not really going to save you. The -1 to wound is much more important. But again, the reason I can't up this defensive, because for his points, that's a lot of defenses. That's very good. But the reason it can't be higher is this only applies to melee. If you run into a Tau matchup, this guy's just a glorified flamer, really. Minus move on Tau can help, but it's not as important as against the melee armies. However, what he does have is his very potent shooting. Synergy with other units, he doesn't really give them the ability to be stronger, but he does give them a very nice shooting piece and the ability to debuff enemy units that you can then charge into, or not have to worry about being charged from so much. So he does have some synergy, but it's not like direct synergy. However, he's very cheap. For cost wise, I think he's pretty effective. Um, he's like, I can't why he's very cheap now. He got a points drop again, but for the weapon he has, he's very strong, I'd say, for his weapon. Again, even if the ability's not coming to play, I feel like the weapon that he brings with the unit is powerful enough to sort of justify his cost, even in those matchups where he's not going to get that much use out of his abilities. Um, I think this guy is very good in rhinos because you can shoot out of the firing port with his flamer, which is again a strength 6 AP2 D3 damage weapon. So your rhino can go around a corner, potentially have 2 of these guys inside, and fire out like God, I can't remember the exact amount of shots. I think it's like D6 plus 3, so it'd be 2d6 plus 6 shots at strength 6 AP2 D3 damage, and bear in mind that can be also with -1 toughness, -1 save. You can actually put a lot of damage out of that thing. So it's very potent, and I think probably the best uses for him is to drive around in rhinos or to provide some anti-elite infantry firepower to your units of Plague Marines. Overall, though, I think he's a solid pick. I don't personally run any at the moment, but it's not because he's bad. I just don't see him fitting in my list at all because I'm not running any rhinos. But if you are running rhinos, he's cheap enough to put in and just give the rhinos some teeth and be able to drop off your Plague Marines and then still drive around, firing out the top roof, dealing damage to all these units at a very efficient rate. So yeah, overall, I like him. Mr. Blightspawn. So, Mr. Blightspawn offensively has a very good flamer, so it's D6 shots. And now the problem with that is it's D6 shots. We used to be able to reroll that, but we can't anymore, so it can be very swingy. However, it is anti-infantry 2 plus, so very strong versus infantry at something like AP 2 damage, which is quite powerful. Now, again, the important thing is it ignores cover and it's automatically hitting, which makes this guy an absolute Overwatch nightmare. People don't want to come near this guy. Mobility wise, he's a Plague Marine. He moves 5, so he's average. I can't give him any more points, can't give him any less. Defensively, again, this depends massively. If you're in melee or you're on a dense board where you can lock down positions, His Overwatch combined with his ability to give his unit fight first can totally shut down an enemy's approach. If you manage to get him in a squad with him, maybe the Plagucaster, as we said, and then like a plague spewer and a plague belcher on plague marines, or even two potentially plague spewers, that's a unit that realistically infantry can't approach, because if they charge in, you're going to fight first and swing at them before they get to swing at you. If they try and just walk past you, they're going to eat something like, I don't know, like 6d6 Overwatch shots that automatically hit all like anti-infantry 2 up, 4 up, multiple damage, ignores cover, strong AP. Um, it's very good for locking down areas of the board. Synergy wise, again, giving a unit fight first means your squishy units like Plague Marines don't feel as squishy, because again, if you're against a melee matchup and they charge in, you're going to get swing first, which again it can be the entire difference between getting wiped and wiping that unit out. However, do bear in mind, all these buffs we're talking about are melee only, really. Like, fight first means nothing against tower, it means nothing against shoot the Eldar. So, having the ability to fight first is extremely powerful and good, but you need to make sure you're still getting the value out of the Flamer in the matchups that aren't um, melee, because otherwise you spent 50 points or 45, whatever it is now, on a unit that's literally accomplishing and doing nothing. So for this reason, we have the Blight Bus as well. Blight Bus is the idea, again, we said before, with the Plagucaster, putting two of them in a Rhino. This is an even cheaper version of that, where we put two of these guys in a Rhino, drive around, out the top, fire import, just racking up some value. Once it explodes, two characters get out, go separate ways, and just become pain in the ass to remove, score secondaries, etc., while also threatening those flamers. So overall, I think he's a good unit. Better if you're running Plague Marines, but you don't think you have to. I think you can run this guy solo in Rhinos. But if you are in a meta that is very heavy in melee, this guy is probably going to be at least a 1 auto, including your army, to make sure you have some access to fight first. So, relatively strong, would never say no. My favourite. I love the Biologous Putrifier. I always have. I loved him last edition. I love him now. This guy, offensively, for his points, and for what he does for the unit he joins, is probably one of the most cost-effective ways to get damage in your army. He is so good. So what he does is he gives a squad he joins lethal hits, which, they already had it on a lot of guns anyway, but it does apply to plasma and melter guns, which is nice. But he then also means your unit critically hits on 5s and 6s. So you're basically doubling the amount of crits this unit's going to get. This is extremely powerful, especially for auto wound weapons, which he gives the squad. But then you can combine it in combat with the sustained hits 1, but potentially sustained hits 2 ability, and you get crits of that also on a 5+, because that requires hit rolls of a 6. So you can have Plague Marines with sustained hits, lethal hits, critting on 5s in a unit, which incredibly spikes their damage potential through the roof. It's so nutty. For the point investment, like 45 points that he is, the amount of damage he adds to a squad is insane. He just spikes the damage so high. He also has decent weapon himself, with his grenade and his pistol. He gives the unit also a free grenade stratagem, which technically, if you really wanted to, you could put 3 of these guys in a Rhino, get them out, and all use the grenade strat on the same turn, which I've seen people do. So that's like potentially like up to 18 mortal wounds on a target, which is quite funny. You won't normally get about 9, but again, you're throwing away 3 characters as well there. But he's fairly self-efficient. Another thing going for this guy is he's got an assault weapon, so his mobility is higher than normal because he can move, advance, and still allow his unit to action. He can still shoot himself, and that's incredibly powerful because you can do stuff like put him in a Rhino, and if the Rhino uses the fire import with his grenade, it inherits the assault keyword, which means the Rhino can now move, advance, and do an action, which is incredibly powerful for a Rhino to be able to score secondaries even easier. So that's a little bit of tech you can use there, which is quite fun. Defensively, though, this guy gives you nothing. He doesn't increase your defenses at all. He's just a 4 wound, 3 up armor model. Extremely squishy. In fact, he's even worse because he explodes when he dies. So he's a potential to hurt yourself as well, which is quite funny. But you're not taking him for that. Synergy wise, I just talked about how good it is. All the synergy it gives to all those lethal hit weapons that our army has an abundance of. You know, it's just so good. Having your heavy plague weapons, hit on 4s, but having exploding and lethal on 5s and 6s means like 66% of the hits you make with heavy plague weapons are going to explode and also automatically wound. It increases their damage through the roof. And for the low points cost that he is, I genuinely think if you're going to put a Virion in a unit, it should be this guy. Especially if you want to deal damage with Plague Marines. 7 Plague Marines and a Rhino of Biologous Putrifier is at 235 points, and that is not a bad bargain. I would happily take that. Let's go something like 3 heavy plague weapons, 2 biotic weapons, double plasma gun, blight launcher. That's a solid loadout, solid decent loadout. Lethal and crits on 5s, can't complain. 3 grenade strat once per game. Can always advance the unit in action because of his assault weapon, and it's one of the only assault weapons in our entire army, so it's really nice to have. Fantastic unit. Always recommend. 90% rating out for me. Um, I want to run this guy more. I just want to see. I need to practice with Plague Marines a bit more, get a bit more comfortable with them. I still think they're a bit too squishy. If they'd have just replaced the rule, the ability of Plague Marines to somewhat better, I would be running this guy with tons of squads. I'd be running multiple, 3 of these guys with 3 7-man squads in Rhinos easily. That'd be so fun. But I think right now he's fantastic. It's the Plague Marines that sort of let him down a little bit, but he makes Plague Marines work. Tallyman. Tallyman, Mr. Counter himself. So, the Tallyman offensively gives the squad he joins +1 to hit, and he has a plasma gun. Plasma pistol, sorry. Now, the pistol keyword's actually not bad. Oh, yeah, this guy, also a pistol. So, even more use, because it means you can do actions in close combat. Is there anything the Biological Putrifier doesn't do? But back to the Tallyman. He has a pistol. Again, like I said, then lets his unit be able to do actions in combat, which is decent. He gives his unit +1 to hit, which is good, especially if you're running heavy plague weapons, because they have weapon skill 4. Going back to hitting on 3s is much more reliable than 4s, so that's a nice buff. Mobility wise, he's just a standard plague marine, so nothing special there. Defensively, like the Biologous Putrifier, is no defensive, is extremely squishy. Synergy wise, again, +1 to hit is very nice. The main reason though we take this guy is for his CP regen. As I said at the bottom there, maths can be lonely. Sometimes you will just take a Tallyman with no Plague Marine, no squad, sit him in your back corner, hidden away, and every turn just roll for command points. 45 points to spend to potentially get 3 command points a game on average is actually not bad. That's actually pretty good value, especially if you're quite a command point hungry general. I think there's a good reason to take him. Now, one thing to remember though with that is that he has the caveat that he has to be on the battlefield. This means putting him with troops like Plague Marines, who normally want Rhinos to go forward and get that mobility, is bad because he doesn't generate CP while he's in a Rhino, as he's technically not on the battlefield. This is super annoying because stuff like the Autarch Way Leader, who has the same rule, doesn't even have to roll for it, just gets the CP, can do it while off the board, which is extremely frustrating. So it's a bit unfair that he has this caveat, but he does, and we've got to work with it. So this is why the main use I can see for this guy is to sit at home on his own and just try and regen you some CP while standing on your home objective and screening stuff out. But for his cost, he's 45 points. You're never going to complain about it, especially if you get 2 or 3 CP, and he's just a body to just hold some area. But I don't think he's auto-include like he used to be. He used to be a lot more reliable when you could roll it in both turns. Now it's just your own turn. But for the points you pay, if you've got left over and you don't want more Nurglings, I think he's a solid include. But you don't have to feel like you have to take this guy anymore. Like he used to literally be out, have to go in every list. Now it's more of a, do I really want the CP or not? Noxious Blightbringer, this is a weird one. His stats all look extremely low, but my personal rating isn't actually that bad. Offensively, he does very little. He has a Bing Bong Bell and a pistol. Pistol, again, lets you action in combat, it's not bad. Mobility-wise, he gives a small boost to his squad because they can reroll advances and charges, which is nice to not have to worry about having to keep a CP for a failed charge. It's nice to just have it for free. Defensively, again, he's like the other Virions that we mentioned. He's very bad. He's just a 4-wound model with a 3-up armor save. Synergy of other units, he doesn't really give much synergy. Again, he gives the rerolls to charge and advance, which is nice, but his actual synergy to his other units in your army isn't that great. This guy, to me, is an absolute tech piece, and that's why his cost effectiveness is low, because in most games you play, and probably if you go to a singles event at the moment, I don't think he's going to have enough impact in every game. However, if you play the one odd game every time and you're playing against your mate like Necrons or like Custodes, and you really don't want to have them doing stuff like fight first or resurrecting models or like resurrecting characters if you manage to snipe them out with heroic challenge. Having this guy in your game with a -2 leadership aura followed by 3 Plague Burst crawls to force Battle Shock tests is absolutely crippling to units that rely on those reactive stratagems. Telling a unit of warriors it can't reanimate because you failed a battle shock test that you had to roll an 8 to pass on 2 dice, and then being able to unload and pick it up before it ever gets a chance to reanimate is insanely powerful. But again, it's niche. It's a tech piece. This is fantastic. Like a teams format would be great for it, where you're actively picking the opponent you're playing into, because you can counter a lot of very important stuff. Again, Custodes needing like 7 ups to pass morale. You got 3 Plague Burst mortals to trigger 3 tests. Good chance they fail one of those, and then they can't fight first. They can't -1 damage. He's not a bad unit. He's genuinely not. He's just not applicable generally, which means that you don't really want to take him to solo events where you can go against a variety of armies. But if you're playing teams or just a local club and there's a meta around where battle shocking those units will actually be greatly beneficial to you, then he's a fantastic tech piece to include, and I definitely wouldn't sleep on this guy. Plus, the model is fucking awesome. So, actually, personal rating is about 65. I think he's underappreciated for what he is. Icon Bearer, oh, this guy. This guy was trash. This guy was Plague Surgeon levels of trash. Talk about zero to hero. With the new changes, this guy got a new lease on life. Offensively himself, he has a bolt gun. Dog shit. You're not running him for that. Mobility, he's not awful because he can advance and do his one trick. That's all you need for this. So you can move or disembark, move, advance, and do his one trick pony ability, which we'll get onto. And that's all you care about. So actually, he's a bit more mobile than usual. Defensively, he's awful. He's a 4-win Plague Marine. The end. Terrible. Why is this guy even worth mentioning then? Everything I've said so far has been bad. Because his synergy with your other units. Once per game, this guy can lift up his little flag and make his Contagion aura count as 12 inches. This can be boosted with Living Plague to 15 inches. This means this guy can move, advance, hold this flag up, and project a 15-inch bubble. So you move 5, potentially disembark 3, so that's 8 inches of movement, potentially move to D6 extra move, so that's potential 14 inches of movement, and then raise a flag that can go up to 12 to 15 depending if you took the enhancement. That is a huge threat range to drop a giant aura of -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill, -1 save, and then you can do stuff like Boil Blight off that aura. So you can turn 1, throw this guy into the middle objective, slam that banner down, tag their most important unit with it, give a -1 save, then put Boil Blight on it for 1 command point, and have every Plague Burst crawl you've got unleash on that unit at 2s to hit, ignoring cover, AP1, -1 save. So you're dropping anything in the game to a 4-up minimum. That is so powerful. And for the point cost, he's like 40 points. He goes out, he does that, you get a lot of value off it. He dies, you don't care. You do not care. He has done his one trick. You can keep the trick, you can strat reserve him, bring him on, project from there. There's so many. Using an Icon Bearer well will get you such a nasty turn of damage output for value that he's almost getting to the point of potentially being auto include. I'm not running him just yet because I need to experiment with a bit more, but from what I've been hearing from people, this guy is a little value engine. Worst case scenario, if there's no good play to be made, he can genuinely just join a squad and be an OBSEC booster. Nothing wrong with that. But really, the power of this guy is the solo combo of this guy. To run out there, hold up that flag, have a big go turn where all the damage, all the auras are over every single important unit, and just pounding the opponent into the ground. What happens to him after that? You don't care. He's just a Plague Marine at that point. So they can kill him, sure. You don't care. But yeah, zero to hero this guy. Definitely start playing with him. Think clever ways to use this aura. The best time to use it when they're stacking up too much, when they've clumped together just a bit too much and you manage to get him right into the middle. Obviously, you got to be careful of stuff like Overwatch and whatnot. But if you do manage to get this guy into the midfield or into a good spot and raise that flag and tag important key units, the value you're going to get back from that is incredible. So definitely a good unit. And now we're depressed. Let me drink some cherryade. The Plague Surgeon. Where do I even start? The Plague Surgeon is depressing. It actually is a depressing model. Offensively, he's actually weirdly got a decently strong weapon. He's got strength 5, AP 2, 2 damage, 4 attacks, which is not bad. He's the strongest of the Virulence in melee, weirdly. Mobility wise, um, he's a normal Plague Marine, but he can do some jank with that, which we'll talk about. Defensively, the Plague Surgeon offers kind of little. He can resurrect models. That's his entire thing. You can resurrect a Plague Marine a turn. Not a player turn, your turn. Your command phase. So, the problem we have is that Plague Marine is now 80 points. So, 80 points, we divide that by 5, is 16 points. 16 points a model for a Plague Marine. This guy is 65 points. So, you would have to resurrect what? 4? No, you would have to actually resurrect 5 Plague Marines to make value off this guy. So that means every single turn, you have to lose a Plague Marine and resurrect it to make this guy worth the inclusion. The fact that Plague Marines got cheaper and this guy didn't made him even worse than he already was. So unless you have your Plague Marine squad survive every turn but take losses every turn, he will never be worth the points include that he brings back. Now, you can heal characters, but I tell you what, characters usually are only getting wounded when their entire unit's been wiped out. That usually means the character's usually going to die. Now, he can't heal Mortarion, or he can't heal Daemon Princes because they're monsters. If he could do that, he might be worth something. But this guy actually pisses me off. Whoever wrote these rules should be ashamed. They're abysmal. Again, if he gave the unit a 6-up Feel No Pain, nope, just res 1 model a turn. There is one thing this guy can do, and it is the nichest jank ever, which is if you have a wall, and there's an objective on this side of the wall that you can't hold from this side of the wall, but you have Plague Marines here, you can put one Plague Marine out onto the objective. You then get shot, and you kill that Plague Marine. In your command phase, before you score primary, but unfortunately after you've... No, you can do it, actually, this works, yeah. Before you score primary, before you lock in sticky objectives, from behind the wall, you can resurrect that model and put him onto the other side of the wall in coherency. Which means then, by the time the end of the command phase comes along, you hold that objective, which then technically scores you the primary and scores you the sticky objective. Problems with this. 1. You have to lose a Plague Marine and not get your unit wiped, which means you probably need a larger squad. 2. He has to be in the perfect position on a map on that exact scenario where the objective is just outside of a wall, but you can stand on the other side of the wall and resurrect within range of the wall, but onto the objective. No. And even then, he's still not making his value back. You'd have to do it 5 times over before he gets any value. Like, this guy genuinely belongs in the goddamn bin. And it sucks because the model is awesome. And the worst bit is, all last edition, this guy had a 6-up Feel No Pain but couldn't resurrect models. And we all said, just let him resurrect models and he'll be good. So GW was like, okay, we'll let him resurrect models. They give us that ability, but then took the Feel No Pain off him. It's like, he's the opposite of last time and he's still just as bad. So I can never see a use for a Plague Surgeon. And I honestly can't recommend him in any. He's the worst character we have access to. Please take anything. Just take 65 spare points. Just don't even put anything in your list. You will feel better to have win a game 65 points down than you will be to field a Plague Surgeon. Don't do it, please. Please buff. Please GW. Please buff. But yeah, he's not good. So hey, we've reached the end of all the characters. So to summarize, we have a good variety of characters. Some of them are tech choices, like the Noxious Blightbringer. Some of them have other uses, like the Chaos Lord. If you're playing quite dense maps, he can hide in corners, project out the aura of mortal wounds, which is really nice for tagging units, getting slow value over time. Don't be afraid to run your character solo. There's nothing wrong with dropping a Lord of Virulence, a Terminator Sorcerer Lord, a Chaos Lord, and not running them with a bodyguard squad. You don't have to. A lot of people feel like taking character means, oh, if I don't have lone up, I can't run it, on its own. But you can, because genuinely sometimes there's so much other stuff going on, or you can just hide them and get value from out of line of sight, like the Chaos Lord. That, sorry, that chariot. Like you don't actually need to always have a bodyguard unit. Sometimes getting a 75.40mm base character, and like this fella here, which I'm currently painting up, and dropping him behind the enemy and just scoring some teleport homers and being like, this is a 6 wound toughness, sorry, T6, 6 wounds, 2 up, 4 up model that you have to come and deal with, or it's going to keep scoring me 4 points a turn. That's value on its own sometimes. Um, Obviously, we talked about unit synergy a lot. That is a lot of value for characters. We have a lot of characters that don't very beat stick very much, but provide lots of output increases to the squad, like the Biologous Putrifier is a fantastic example. Um, Also, the synergies between other things, such as being able to tag units with -1 to wound with a Plagucaster, is very nice if you manage to then charge him with something like Death Shroud. So it's not even the squad he's attached to, but again, you're managing to overlap those debuffs to sort of increase the odds of your guys surviving or increase the damage output. Mortarion is the literal pinnacle of unit synergy. He just gives all those abilities to those units to ignore all defensives, and that's extremely powerful. And the last summary we can come to is bin your goddamn Plague Surgeon. Don't bin him. Like, put him on a shelf. Just don't run him, please, please. Um, but yeah, hopefully talking about these characters sort of helps understand the roles of certain characters, what they can be used for, some synergies that you can use them for, and maybe learn a few tricks like the Biologous Putrifier being an assault weapon in a Rhino. That's a cool trick. The Icon Bearer trick to get that turn 1 contagions out. There's lots of different things you can do with our characters, and I think now's a great time with the new rules to experiment, really try out new things. Like I said, I'm taking this Chaos Lord that I've built up today and painted today. He's not done, and he's more painting to an RTT on Tuesday, I think. I can't remember when it is, whenever it is, but to test him out, to get him to, see how he performs, and maybe I'll take it to the LGT if it impresses me. We'll see. But yeah, there's lots to play around with. Keep experimenting, keep trying, and stay positive unless you're playing a Plague Surgeon, in which case, enjoy your depression. And remember, everyone, a win for Death Guard is a win for Kirby. And we love Kirby. Kirby's my dog. Worship him. Anyway, yeah, thank you for listening to everyone. I got some more thank yous for here today. So thank you to Razvan, or Raz as I'm calling him. If you haven't noticed, the channel's had a bit of a decoration upgrade. We got a new header, a new logo, etc. This fella is a fantastically talented artist who's kindly given us all these amazing pieces of artwork off the skin of his own back. And honestly, I'm blown away. He's captured the character of the show not being mega serious and etc. The Cherryades there, the Nurglings there, the Custodes helmets there because we crush Custodes on this channel. It looks fantastic. I'm blown away, and I'm very honoured to have him on there. So thank you very much, Raz, for doing that for us. My partner again, who helped us upgrade the presentations. Obviously, she helps massively in making these presentations, making these videos more consumable for you guys, a bit better looking than my 10-year-old presentation. The Nurgles Mansion Discord, again, all the pictures of the models used on here were provided by those guys and gals because I'd want to show off people's work rather than just stock GW images, because these people are really the heart and soul of this army. And also thank you to my friend Danny Parkinson, who's been sat with me for the last 2 nights while I made this presentation and listened to me waffle about why I rate certain units certain ways, even though he plays World Eaters. So thank you for that, but I appreciate the company. It stopped me going insane because we have so many characters. And of course, to you, the listener, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the content. More will be coming. Let me know what you want to hear from next. We're going to have some more live streams soon, etc. And obviously this series will continue alongside the podcast. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed yourself. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode of Discussing Brilliant Podcast. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night.